Hi, everyone. Welcome to our case study. It's great to see so many of you are already in here. So I'm going to just dive right in and get started. So for those of you who I have not met yet, I'm Dr. Rebecca Troy, owner and founder of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. And so if you are new to the system, every other week we are on here celebrating our client graduates because I'm sure that most of you know that there is a pretty large narrative out there that there's nothing that you can do for dyslexia, that it is forever, you're never going to be able to change it, and if you can, it's going to be years and years for you to make that shift. So we always love to share these case studies where our parents have done such a phenomenal job of massively shifting their child's data, and they've done it in a timely manner because I think it's very inspiring for you. So if you are a parent out there and you are feeling like you're on a hamster wheel and you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you're massively frustrated, I hope that this case study inspires you. So today we're going to talk about Alexia, who was 8 at the time she went through the program. She went from the 50th percentile or 50% accurate in phonological awareness to 98% accurate. Her reading scores on the wide range achievement test 5 went from the 9th percentile to the 97th percentile. Her spelling scores went from the 16th to the 32nd, plus she had many, many additional items that were all phonetically correct, but she just had the pattern a little bit off. Had she had those patterns, she would have had 88% accurate in her spelling. And her mom said it's like night and day different. I don't even have words to describe how different it is. Finding this program has changed so much for us in all facets of life. So if you have not heard of us before, you don't know what we do, we employ cutting edge neuroscience techniques to reorganize how the brain is hearing and responding to language, making reading and spelling exponentially improved within just a few months. So all of the results that we're about to talk about happened within 6.5 months. So they were massive increases in confidence, independence in reading and spelling. And we allow you to do all of this from the comfort of your own home, making it accessible and practical to families. So before we get started, I want to really help you understand the neurobiological piece of dyslexia because I think it's just really, really critical for you as a parent. So if you take a look at this image here, you'll see that this is an fMRI of 2 children side by side. Now, if we were to look at these kids with their eyes closed, we would notice nothing different about these brains. But the minute that we ask these 2 children to perform a language task, that might be something like read these words or spell these words or decode this page of text, any of those language type activities, this is what's going to happen in the brain. So you'll notice in the person without dyslexia that we've got brain activity in the back here, which is what we would call the occipital lobe, where vision takes place. And we also have significant activity over here in the sides, which we call the parietal temporal lobe, where our hearing of the language takes place. And then when you compare that to the person with dyslexia, you can see that we don't have brain activity in occipital and we have far less in the parietal temporal lobes. And so why that's important is that when you are a person with dyslexia and this information comes into your brain, if you don't have activity there that's going to allow you to hear all of the sounds or see all of that accurately and at the same time connect it together with the sound component, you're going to misfire. And when you do that, it might look like I've decoded this word accurately, and then 2 lines later, it's like I've never seen this word before. Or when I'm spelling, I might add letters in that don't belong, or I might omit letters that should have been there. But either way, this brain activity or this brain profile causes issues for the child with dyslexia. So here's another way that we can look at that. This is instead an EEG of the same thing. So you can see in this image, the typical reader has activity again in the back occipital and in parietal temporal. The reader with dyslexia does not have activity here and far less in parietal temporal, but after you provide remediation and support, you absolutely can reorganize how the brain is hearing and responding to language. So one of the things that I think is really beautiful about technology is we've learned a lot through neural imaging in the last 40 years about what's possible in our brain. And we know that through a variety of different activities that we do repetitively and consistently, we can reorganize how the brain functions. It's a living, breathing organ in our body that is capable of changing over time. And so I think that that's just super inspirational to know that you absolutely can help your child who is massively struggling to read and spell to do those things through the power of neuroplasticity. So let's dive in to Laura and Alexia's case specifically. And, I'm sure that when I'm telling you about this, you'll maybe recognize yourself or your child within this. So for Alexia, they decided to homeschool. So they're in a hybrid model where they do 3 days at home and then 2 days at school. And so oftentimes what happens is you think your child is maybe a little bit behind, but you don't really realize how far behind they are until you have the ability to compare them with somebody else their age. So whether that's, a neighbor down the street or a cousin or somebody else in their classroom. But her mom said, I really thought that she was where everybody else was. Yes, reading was a struggle at home and it was extremely frustrating to her, but it wasn't until she got into that 2 days at school where it was very obvious that she was really struggling. So at their particular school, they kind of moved kids around. She was not allowed to be in the group with the rest of her peers. She had to be moved down to the lower group, which was super frustrating for her. So mom obviously was a very caring parent. She read with her daughter every day. She did a lot of work to try to help her learn her letter sounds. But she said, even as a little person, she worked with Alexia for 2 to 3 years to learn her letter sounds. And she said it was like she couldn't recall anything at all. Like we had learned the letter D over and over and over again. And it's like she'd never seen it before. She would often say, this is too hard. And then, I think this is, again, very common, but there was a stigma that came from not being at grade level that started to hurt Alexia's self-esteem. And so when Mama Laura was compelled to really move forward is when she could see that it was hurting her emotionally. So there have been a lot of studies on this, and we know that at the tender age of 7, kids start to develop a self-concept. So they are aware of themselves and how they may be the same or different than other people around them. Before that, kids are kids and they don't necessarily notice those things. But psychologically, 7 years old is when you start to really be able to see how you are maybe the same or different than others. And so that's really sometimes when kids start to take their struggles in reading more to heart, and those things become far more challenging. So she said, I'm not exaggerating in any way when I say that we had to get over the hump of crying at the kitchen table every day. We were making it as simple and as fun as we could. Nothing we were doing was clicking. It was like the first time every time. And she didn't want to label her with something, but she got to the point where she realized it shouldn't be this hard. So, she thought as a homeschool mom, like maybe it's me, maybe it was the curriculum that we were using. And she said a little Googling made me realize that the curriculum that we were using is typically used for kids with dyslexia, and it still wasn't working. So when she started to learn about not only our program, but specifically about what the brain is capable of doing, she said it was really exciting to know that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. As a homeschool mom, she thought it was her that was failing her. And now it's like night and day different. She said, I just don't even have words before it. So prior to doing the program, she couldn't read independently at all. Now she reads to her brother and sister bedtime stories every night. She's reading chapter books. Yesterday, she sat at the table and she wrote for 2 hours. I went on with my day and she stayed at the table writing and writing. Before all of, before what she did was they have an Alexa in their kitchen, and she would walk over to Alexa and she would say, Alexa, how do you spell this word? She'd write it down. Alexa, how do you spell this word? And she'd write it down. And so that was her mode of writing before she did the program. And now she's able to sit down and write continuously for 2 hours. She said, finding the program has changed so much, but the biggest victory has been her mindset. So I thought that we were entering a program to learn how to get better at reading, but her mindset has totally changed. So a big factor for a lot of kids that are struggling, whether it's with dyslexia or anything else, is this growth mindset potential. So that's when you understand that I'm not fixed in the way that I'm performing right now. My effort, my consistency, me showing up has the capacity to shift the way that it currently is over time. And so being able to shift that mindset for her has shifted everything, because she recognizes now that just because something's hard doesn't mean that she's not capable. She can't even remember the last time that she cried about schoolwork. And then she did also say, when I interviewed her, that it's made a huge difference for her to have the weekly accountability calls, the ability to ask questions and obtain support. So if you want to dig deeper into Laura's story specifically, we interviewed her and her story is on YouTube for you to watch if you want to hear directly from her. But I'll tell you just one last story before we move into her data, because I think this probably resonates with so many of you. So Laura ran into one of her former teachers in the grocery store. And this was someone that she had deeply respected, had a great relationship with in school. And so they were just chatting. And in that conversation, she had mentioned that her daughter had dyslexia and that, she was really loving audiobooks. And what the teacher said is, well, it's good that she loves audiobooks, because the chances are that if she's dyslexic, that's the only way that she's going to be reading. And so it was, I think, a telltale sign that sometimes the people that we would assume have a different mindset about reading or growth or the brain or learning often don't. And so it was empowering for her to not only prove the teacher wrong, that no, actually we can make a life-changing difference and massively shift her skills, but she was able to do that herself, which I think is just so empowering as a parent. She now writes notes in her lunchbox, which she said before, I know it's a small thing, but all of the other kids were getting notes in their lunchbox and they could read them and she couldn't. She always had to ask for help. And so even just those little things of oh man, this gets to be easy now too, have been such a huge blessing for her and her family. They took the mentality that if they were going to get help, that it was better early than late. So that's kind of a little bit about their personal story, kind of what they went through, how things have shifted for them. So let's dive into her data. So this is just a snapshot. When she started, her phonological awareness was 50% accurate. So that's her ability to hear all of the sounds in language and be able to manipulate those. And so it was only 50-50 that her brain was able to do that. By the end, she only got one wrong. So she was at 98% accuracy. So absolutely a massive shift in her brain's ability to manipulate, hear, respond to words. We use the wide range achievement test 5, which is a norm referenced assessment. It's not subjective in any way. It's pretty clear, cut and dry. When she started with us, she was reading at the 9th percentile, which means that she was reading better than 9 out of 100 kids her age. And 6.5 months later, she ended at the 97th percentile, meaning that she was decoding words better than 97 out of 100 kids her age. And again, with the spelling, she started at the 16th percentile, ended at the 32nd, had a ton of words that she was super close with, but slightly missed the pattern. Had she had those, it would have been the 88th percentile. So again, when we look at this, 21 out of 42 accurate, so half of that was incorrect, to only having one error. And then I think it's always helpful to kind of look at the educational statistics. So I don't know how long it's been since you've looked at statistics or how comfortable you feel with it. So I'll give you a quick primer. This is the normal distribution curve. And so when we talk about data, we've got this red line here that represents the 50th percentile. So that would be average in any data set. So there have been researchers that have studied like, okay, how much growth does a typical kid make in a school year? Like, what does that typically look like? And so when they've studied that, they've said a 0.3. So from this red line to this +1 is what we would call a standard deviation. This is a full standard deviation of growth. So a 0.3 is what would be typical of an average kid in a school year. This green line is a 0.5, which is moderate statistical significance. This orange line is a 0.8, which is significant statistical significance. And then anything over that is just like, amazing in terms of statistical data and educational research. So when we look at what happened with Alexia and Laura, she started at the 9th percentile. So this red little tab here represents where she was at the beginning of the program. And the yellow one is what would be typical growth for an average kid in a school year. So we know that all kids grow, they learn new things, they develop, but this is what would have happened had she not intervened. Now, if Laura was in a program that was going to be giving her statistically significant results, she would have obtained this brown one here. But instead, she made 1, 2, 3 standard deviations of growth in 6.5 months. So even though we haven't, scanned Alexia's brain to see that it's massively shifted, we can know based on her data that she has far surpassed what would have happened to a typical kid in an entire year in 6.5 months. So massive, massive shifts in how that happened for her, which also was outlined in the spelling. So again, the red one is where she was when she started. The yellow one is what would have happened in an entire school year for growth. If she was in a statistically significant program, that would be the brown one, and she surpassed that as well, going a full standard deviation of growth from where she started, and she ended up at the green one. Again, she had so many words that were really, really close, but instead of putting an EE for the spelling pattern, she put an EA. And so if she has just a little bit more work on those spelling patterns, she would have been up at the 88th percentile, which is totally attainable, but might just take a little bit longer than 6 months. So I think one of the things that's really important to point out is that Laura had to become an advocate. So as a parent of a child with dyslexia, you don't always realize when you're starting out that you might have to be an advocate for your kiddo. You are going to have to maybe approach the school or contend with people who have beliefs about where your child should be and they're not. And so it can be really, really challenging. And so even though she didn't want to label her child and she was very, very hesitant to say, my kid has dyslexia because of all of what that could mean, she was also staring at the real truth that this was impacting her daughter's self-esteem. It was making her feel really terrible about herself. She was crying every single day. So she knew that even though this was challenging, she had to do something. She was committed to the process, she trusted it, and she showed up fully to do the work. So I think that's something that is really important to mention here, is that yes, we provide families with a step-by-step plan of exactly how to get you from A to B, but it doesn't happen with the wave of a magic wand. Like, you actually have to show up and do the work day after day. So plasticity happens through repetition, and repetition happens through consistency and showing up to do the things. And so what I can say about Laura as a client is that she showed up fully. She came to all of the accountability calls, support calls. She asked questions when she needed it, and she was consistent. Definitely her daughter's greatest advocate, supported her, encouraged her along the way. And now, things are massively, massively different. So here's Alexia. Her mom had shared some pictures with us, celebrations in the group. She said, "This is my girl. She's laughing as she reads fun, engaging stories. She used to really struggle with the enjoyment of reading because of what she was capable of reading was so elementary. She's actually enjoying it now." So then she had shared this, like, just within the last couple of hours. Like, this was just last week. She's reading more advanced books now. She used to be so intimidated by so many words on the page. I don't know if you can see the difference between the text that she's reading here and the text that she's reading here. But we have the ability to keep in touch with our clients, and they continue to celebrate and share. Like, this is how my child has continued to grow after they exited the program. And so this was probably an earlier decodable book that, again, was her first chapter book. We're celebrating that. That's amazing. And, within a year of that, she is full up reading advanced books, doing awesome. So night and day difference, huge reward and victory. Mama was massively encouraged that she took the chance to say, I know that I don't want to have to be the one to do this, but I am, and I can ensure that it's going to happen to the way that I would like it to be. So here's what we know about the data and statistics from the hundreds and hundreds of clients that we support every year. So as I mentioned, an average growth for a child is 0.3, a statistically significant result is a 0.8. Our average client makes 1.75 standard deviations of growth from the time they start to the time that they finish. And often, I would say most of our clients finish within that 4 to 6 month range. It's just a huge difference to have that be your result, as opposed to I am sitting and spinning, we keep trying things, and no matter what we're doing, it seems like our results are the same. So I can't even tell you how many times we have conversations with intake clients where they say, we've been trying this program, we've gone to this tutoring, we've done ABC 1, 2, 3, and we've made minimal progress. Yes, we're progressing some, but it's not the massive gains that we would hope to see. And so why that's important is that time isn't always on our side. If your child continues to miss out on opportunities, if they continue to have ongoing struggles, if they miss out on future opportunities, like, it becomes this belief cycle that can have some really harmful damage to their self-esteem, to their confidence, to all of those things moving forward. And so we believe that it's critical to close the gap as quickly as possible between your child's current performance and their peers. So when you're talking about doing interventions, you want those things to be massively shifting in a short period of time, because it's going to help improve their academic performance. It's going to increase their self-esteem and confidence. It's going to give them better mental health and greater access to future opportunities, which, as you know, is just a super critical component to your child's success. So oftentimes, like, when you're here and listening, you might not even know if your child has dyslexia. So sometimes that's the first step. It's like, oh, I've got this gut feeling and I really want to check in on that. I would highly recommend that if that's you sign up to do our dyslexia discovery workshop. So we walk you through a huge, tutorial of, like, these are all the signs and symptoms, and then here are 3 screener assessments that you can give your child within 20 minutes that are going to let you know for sure if dyslexia is really what you're dealing with and to what level. Is it a severe case? Is it a moderate case? Sometimes having that data is very powerful for you as a parent to be able to make decisions and next steps on what to do. And then if you are, somebody who's like, oh my goodness, I'm super inspired. We cannot keep doing what we're doing right now, and we want to move forward, we would invite you to speak with a member of our team. So those are complimentary calls that we do for everybody, because I think it's important for us to know more about your child, to know more about your journey, and to see whether or not your child would be a good candidate for the program. And so if that's you, you can comment in the chat and we would be happy to get you in touch with somebody on our team and get, again, a complimentary call to see if it's a good fit for you.